On this Tuesday night, Ukraine urges calm as the rhetoric ramps up. The U.S. sends military equipment to Ukraine and warns Russia of enormous consequences if it invades.
It would be the largest invasion since World War II. It would change the world.
Ordered out, Ottawa tells families of diplomatic staff to leave as Ukrainian-Canadians wonder what's next.
I'm worried. I don't know what's going to happen, and nobody knows what's going to happen.
Boris Johnson fights for his political survival.
The Met is now investigating a number of events that took place at Downing Street.
And the final destination. Will the world's most powerful telescope tell us how it all began?
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We begin with the uncertainty over what the Russian president intends to do about Ukraine. Vladimir Putin's spokesperson is accusing the U.S. of escalating tensions, saying he's profoundly concerned the U.S. has put more than 8,000 American troops on heightened alert. Russia today announced a flurry of what it calls military drills right across its territory, releasing these images, including in Belarus, near Ukraine. Russia insists it has no intention of invading Ukraine, even though it's built up thousands of troops near the border. Today, U.S. President Joe Biden said he'd consider imposing sanctions against Vladimir Putin himself. And he said there will be enormous consequences if Russia makes a move on Ukraine.
If he were to move in with all those forces, it would be the largest invasion since World War II. It would change the world.
Biden also clarified that he has no intention of moving U.S. troops directly to Ukraine, but might move them into nearby NATO countries. Asked whether the risk of an invasion is increasing or decreasing, Biden said assessing Putin's intentions is like reading tea leaves. Our coverage begins with Crystal Goomansingh in Kyiv, Ukraine.
Despite continuous calls for calm, fears that Russia will invade Ukraine refuse to fade. Russia releasing this new military training video Tuesday highlighting its force. Meanwhile, more military assets from NATO allies are making their way to Eastern Europe. This frigate from Denmark is headed to the Baltic Sea, and another American supply plane landed in Kyiv stocked with military equipment and munitions. Below ground in a Soviet-era bunker, hand cranks are turning once again for protection. Manual air circulation is a feature of this bomb shelter in Kyiv. This cold, dimly lit multi-room space is for city employees in case of an emergency. Here, they can do some basic work for a few days. This bunker isn't very big, but this is a map of the underground facility, and we're in this room right here. Now, this bunker was first opened up in 1971. It is not very big, but can hold about 210 people. Now, you'll see there's a lot of these posters on the walls. Obviously, first aid has changed over the years, but a lot of these talk about what to do in the case of biological attack, a nuclear attack. And these were actually added, these posters were added after the Chernobyl disaster. The chief of the Civil Protection Department says shelters like this one can be stocked with water and food on short notice. There are many others accessible around the city that citizens can access, and maps have been published pinpointing their locations. Alexander Levy says, I hope that we won't need it, but we have to have it. We have to be ready for anything. The main thing, we need peace in this world. Some feel the bunkers, talk of war, and the auxiliary training sessions are more for show than a sign of something inevitable. Lubov Rud was a teacher in the former Soviet Union and remembers instructions for school children during the Cold War when people feared American bombs. She'll go to the basement for safety, but doesn't think it'll come to that. Still, people are making plans. Vitaly is a reservist and has organized papers for his family in Kyiv should he need to send them out of the country for their safety. There are thousands more preparing for the same. For now, people are getting on with their daily lives, but having experienced the 2014 invasion, the bloodshed that followed, and the annexation of Crimea, Ukrainians know anything is possible. Donna?
All right, Crystal Goomansingh in Ukraine tonight, thanks. Canada is still considering its role in all of this and what our military is capable of offering. Families of diplomats at the embassy in Ukraine and military personnel have now been ordered out of the country. Our Ottawa Bureau Chief Mercedes Stephenson is looking at that angle tonight. Mercedes?
Donna, Canada now says that diplomats' families must leave Ukraine due to the ongoing military buildup and what the minister's office described as, quote, destabilizing activities in and around Ukraine. This follows the lead of the United States, which ordered diplomats' families to leave the U.S. Embassy in Kyiv on Sunday. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and his cabinet are still deliberating over what next steps they might take to help Ukraine. He's expected to make an announcement here tomorrow in Ottawa on that. National security sources say they expect Ottawa and the Liberal government to approve a shipment of hundreds of guns and ammunition for the Ukrainian military. It is unclear, though, if Ottawa is considering Ukraine's request for more troops on Operation Unifier in Ukraine. The government could also choose to put more troops into the region around Ukraine by beefing up Operation Reassurance, which is based in Latvia and the Mediterranean Sea, but it could expand back out to countries like Romania, where we've had a presence before. Sources say that Canada is not looking to fight a war and does not believe the small contribution of guns and ammo to the Ukrainian military is going to make any kind of a strategic difference. But this, Donna, really is about a signal of support and showing NATO-wide deterrence, something allies are collaborating on. The Canadian government is also bracing for the potential of more cyber attacks from Russia, according to national security sources, when those additional supports for Ukraine are announced in the coming days. Another potential trigger, a planned visit for the Minister of National Defense, Anita Anand, to Ukraine. That certainly, they think, could trigger more cyber attacks on Canada. Donna?
All right, Mercedes Stephenson in Ottawa, thanks. Canada has the largest Ukrainian population outside of Ukraine and Russia. More than 1.3 million people identify as Ukrainian-Canadian, and many are increasingly uneasy about the uncertainty in their homeland. Mike Drolet has been speaking to some of them.
Even in 2016, when Maxim Stolyarevsky had a family reunion in Kyiv, he couldn't escape the feeling that Russia was at the doorstep. Tensions have been simmering, he says, every day since Ukraine's pro-Russian government was ousted in 2014.
We've been living under pressure and under stress for quite a while now, but definitely in the last months or so, I think that level of anxiety increased tenfold.
Russia is all Ukrainian-Canadians are talking about right now. Toronto's Christine Eliashevsky, who lives off and on in Ukraine, says the uncertainty has left many ill at ease.
I'm not scared. I'm not scared, but I am very, very anxious. I'm worried. I don't know what's going to happen, and nobody knows what's going to happen.
Canada has a large Ukrainian population, 1.4 million based on the last census, mostly in Western Canada and the prairies. They've been vocal in their attempts to encourage Western governments to intervene on their behalf. But while the number of politicians who have posted pictures with the hashtag Stand With Ukraine banner creates conversation, words and pictures will only do so much.
We believe that the most effective way to deter further Russian invasion is to take proactive rather than reactive steps. Ukrainians are not asking anyone to fight for them, but they need our help to defend their country against a colonial power seeking their destruction.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has been very clear in recent years that he believes Ukraine is fundamentally part of Russia, even going so far as to call Russians and Ukrainians one people.
He won't go away, and I think Ukrainians will be faced with Putin and Russia for the rest of their lives, for the rest of history, until the regime changes in Russia.
That could make for a very cold future. Mike Drolet, Global News, Toronto.
Now to the pandemic. The federal government is resisting pressure from those who want the vaccination mandate for cross-border truck drivers scrapped. In a statement, the government said since the start of the pandemic, it's been consulting with the Canadian Trucking Alliance, and both agree vaccines combined with public health measures are the most effective tool to reduce the risk of COVID-19. A convoy of truckers and others opposed to public health mandates are on their way from Vancouver to Ottawa. They call themselves the Freedom Convoy. It was organized by a group called Canada Unity, which claims measures to reduce the spread of COVID are unlawful. And it's got the support of some prominent Conservatives. Former federal leader Andrew Scheer tweeted, "Thank you, truckers," and called Prime Minister Justin Trudeau the biggest threat to freedom in Canada. A GoFundMe page has now collected more than $4.6 million to support the convoy, though GoFundMe has now put a hold on those funds until the organizer is able to provide a clear plan on how the money will be spent. In the UK, the British Prime Minister appears to be redefining the term political party. The police are now investigating multiple gatherings held at 10 Downing Street during the lockdown, including a birthday party for Boris Johnson himself in June of 2020. As Redmond Shannon reports, it's adding to the already intense pressure for Johnson to step down.
Happy birthday to Minister.
This may not have been the only celebration of Boris Johnson's birthday in June 2020. 30 staff reportedly gathered for an event in honour of the British Prime Minister at his Downing Street office too. There are now at least 16 news reports of lockdown rules allegedly being broken in and around Downing Street, including a BYO party and another with a suitcase of wine. Now, police are involved.
I can confirm that the Met is now investigating a number of events that took place at Downing Street and Whitehall in the last 2 years in relation to potential breaches of COVID-19 regulations.
Downing Street says no laws were broken, but Johnson's reactions to the mounting news reports keep changing, from denial,
all the guidelines were observed,
to contrition.
Mr. Speaker, I want to apologise.
And now, acceptance.
So I welcome the Met's decision to conduct its own investigation.
A civil service inquiry into events is expected to report back this week, potentially triggering an attempt from Johnson's Tory MPs to topple him.
Frankly, cannot believe that this man is still the head of our government and our representative on the international stage.
Amos Waldman's grandmother Sheila died of COVID-19. The family had to attend the funeral over Zoom.
It just makes you so angry and exasperated and tired, just exhausted by it all, because it's just prolonged everyone's pain.
It's no surprise that this entire saga has been hugely damaging to Johnson's Conservatives in the polls. Donna?
Okay, Redmond Shannon in London, thanks. Another devastating discovery in BC. Coming up, the results of a 9-month investigation at a former residential school. There's been another confirmation of unmarked graves at a residential school in Canada. Williams Lake First Nation in BC says an initial ground radar search found evidence of what could be 93 unmarked graves. They're near the former site of the St. Joseph's Mission Residential School. Thousands of Indigenous children were forced to attend. Some never went home. Heather Yorks West reports, and a warning, there are disturbing details in her story.
I want to just take time to do a moment's silence for those children that are missing.
It began with a moment of quiet reflection as members of Williams Lake First Nation gathered to share preliminary results of a 9-month-long investigation. For Chief Willie Sellers, the results were painful to share.
Our team has recorded not only stories involving the murder and disappearance of children and infants, they have listened to countless stories of systematic torture, starvation, rape, and sexual assault of children at St. Joseph's Mission.
Examination of the site of the school and the surrounding grounds revealed children are indeed buried there.
To date, 93 reflections have been recorded at the St. Joseph's Mission. All of them display varying characteristics indicative of potential human burials.
The St. Joseph's Mission Residential School no longer stands near Williams Lake, but for nearly 100 years it was the site of so much heartache. Phyllis Webstad was among the many children forced to attend. Her story of loss as a 6-year-old here in 1973 inspired a national day to learn and remember.
My granny bought me a shiny new orange shirt to go to school in. When I got there, I was stripped, my clothing taken away, including my new orange shirt.
In a statement, Webstad called the confirmation of children's remains found at the mission traumatizing, but also validation of the stories told. Williams Lake First Nation launched its search on the grounds of St. Joseph's after the Tecumloops de Secwepemc First Nation revealed that the remains of 215 children had been discovered via a radar search of the former Indian residential school site in Kamloops, British Columbia. Other discoveries would follow, including the unmarked graves of more than 700 people near the Maryvale Residential School on the Cowessess First Nation in Saskatchewan. Discoveries that have prompted a national reckoning over the country's treatment of Indigenous children, both then and now.
We cannot afford to have another generation grow up without understanding the truth of the residential school system and the impact it has had on First Nations people. We need to heal.
The Williams Lake First Nation says the investigation here is far from done, but they've committed to continue, working to bring every bit of this community's dark chapter into the light where healing can begin. Heather Urix West, Global News, Calgary.
There is some support for those affected by this. The 24-hour crisis line is available. The number is toll-free. You can speak in confidence. It's 1-800-721-0066. Turning memes into money ahead, how social media has changed the stock market game. The pandemic has been a tumultuous time for global stock markets. We've seen peaks and valleys that not many could have predicted. One thing has become increasingly clear: the way people invest is changing. In the final installment of our Influenced series, Anne Gaviola explains how COVID-19 and social media combined to impact the markets in a major way.
Rory Nickel never really picked stocks before the pandemic, but COVID restrictions, extra cash, and free time factored into his new obsession, especially meme stocks, which were all the rage on Reddit and Twitter.
I got caught into the hype of not only was it like a way to make money, but it felt like there was a community of us coming together.
According to new data shared exclusively with Global News by British Columbia's securities regulator, more than a third of Canadians are getting investment information from social media and online forums at least once a week.
Facebook is the fourth most popular source after news articles, TV, and radio. Online forums and social media are such popular places for stock discussions and investment scams that regulators are targeting them, from subreddits like Bay Street Bets to platforms like Kijiji and Craigslist. The Ontario Securities Commission says social media creates digital echo chambers where investment risks aren't always clearly communicated.
People have an investment thesis and it gets reinforced over and over again by people who are have a similar mind about the value of those assets. I think that's very similar to what we've seen in social media generally.
The BC Securities Regulator says stock talk on social media skews male and young.
Take some time to think about the information. Who's giving you the information? Might it be exaggerated or misleading, potentially fraudulent?
Market analysts say keeping tabs on the stock market now includes keeping on top of social media.
Right now it is the Wild West, and at some point it's going to have to be reined in.
Jeff Gadway put some money into meme stocks as an experiment.
When you see these, herds of people rushing towards what seem to be easy money opportunities, I think it creates a lot of FOMO. We know social media does that.
He lost money after the 2021 GameStop surge that made international headlines, but says he came away with some valuable lessons. Anne Gaviola, Global News, Toronto.
Next, unraveling the mysteries of our universe thanks to a massive new telescope. After decades of preparations, the James Webb Telescope has finally reached its sweet spot in outer space. The $10 billion project is the world's largest and most powerful telescope ever deployed. Eric Sorensen explains what it's searching for and the crucial role Canada played in its creation.
Decollage, liftoff. After 30 years of preparation, it's been a nerve-wracking 29 days.
Séparation Webb Space Telescope. Go Webb!
The James Webb Space Telescope zoomed from Earth to a place 1.5 million kilometers away, all the while fine-tuning, stretching out its tennis court-sized solar shield and unfolding its giant mirror.
We're now at our orbital destination and soon enough be able to make amazing discoveries.
Webb has parked in a perfect location, shielded from the heat and light of the sun. At 85 degrees Celsius on the hot side, the instruments would not have lasted. But on the cold side, at minus 233 Celsius, Webb can work for years. In the dark, its infrared cameras will gaze deep into the universe.
James Webb is going to follow the Earth around.
Canadian astronomer Lisa Dang will be among the first to use Webb to study a distant exoplanet with oceans of lava and a rock vapor atmosphere that could reveal life elsewhere in the universe.
First, we're looking at the constituents of the atmosphere of a lot of planets. What are the processes that are making these constituents? Is it life? And if it is, then how are we going to move forward and detect this life?
Canada is a major partner with NASA and the European Space Agency, building an imager to probe those faraway planets and a guidance sensor to focus on the most distant galaxies. That will take us closer to the Big Bang. The Webb telescope will gather light, peering back more than 13 billion years to help understand how it all began.
That's when the modern structure of the universe was, the template was being laid down. Webb is going to be able to show us how those stars formed and how those galaxies and galaxy clusters were forming right back there at the beginning of time. That will be huge.
The mirrors will be tweaked for months. The first clear images should be visible in June. It all culminates 20 years of work for one Canadian astronomer, and the best is still to come.
I'm on the team that's looking at the baby galaxies and then the growth of galaxies. All of us right here at St. Mary's are super excited.
One added bonus, Webb didn't need as much fuel as planned for the flight, so it will have more fuel to operate well beyond its 10-year lifetime. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
And that is Global National for this Tuesday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada is Mississauga, Ontario. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.